Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Really pleased today to be joined by Malleka Gupta. Great to have you here today.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for having me here today.
No worries, looking forward to the conversation. So to kick things off, do you want to let people know what it is that you do?
Well, I go by Mind and Body Connect Coach, and what essentially it is connecting you back to your authentic self. So, in the course of life, we kind of get really busy with external noises, and that internal noise kind of goes silent or is often unheard. And so my job is basically to get you back into connection with that voice, that gut feeling, you could call it. And basically, my belief is, and my work has shown me that everything's linked to that. Your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, everything is linked to that. So that is what I do. I help people connect back.
No, amazing, and definitely want to dig into what that looks like in practice. But what are the kinds of people that you work with? Is it a wide variety? Are there kind of specific types of people or situation that bring people to you? What does that look like normally?
I'm glad you're asking me that because that's a question that's often asked. And when I started off initially, everybody was telling me, you need to work with either women or men or whatever. But fortunately, I think women, men, children, everybody has trusted me. So I've dealt with kids as young as 10, and I've worked with people as old as 74.
Yeah,
Men, women, young adults, anybody and everybody. The only thing I always say is, are you willing to work? Because there
yeah.
is no magic pill, there is no magical solution to anything. So anybody who's willing to work on themselves, I work with.
Cool, amazing. And what are they? What are they typically coming to you with?
So they could come, like I've dealt with cases like this lady came with PMDD, and she was depressed and she was anxious. So I kind of helped her with that. Then with students or young adults, it's usually job and peer pressure or anxiety that they've carried on from childhood.
Yeah,
It could be that, or just a general disconnect. My job's not keeping me satisfied. I feel really unhappy. I burst out crying into things, or why do I need to have alcohol to be able to enjoy a party? It could be anything, really, honestly, because, like I always say, our entire experience, life experience, is our translation of our emotions. So, how we translate those emotions and how we weave that story. So, really, everything that we experience, be it physical, mental, or emotional, has something to do with that story, that narrative
amazing.
we are telling ourselves.
Yeah, interesting. And what was it that kind of led you to doing this type of work in the first place?
Um, I think I was always, well, I was fortunate growing up in a family where there was a lot of emphasis on self and the idea of energy, that we are all energies and we are all connected. So now, with the quantum physics and all the talk about everybody's energy, that is the idea I grew up with. Um, I think before COVID, I hit my lowest point when it came to mental health. And I kind of spiraled in a very bad mental health state. I remember going to the GP and the GP giving me this um, little checklist kind of a thing.
Yeah,
And when I saw that, I realized, okay, so she thinks I'm depressed. And it all made perfect sense to me at that point. So at that point, I had two choices. I said, either I go on medication or I do something else. Now, it kind of just instinctively pulled me back to the idea of we are all energies. And I went on that route and I kept asking the question, who am I? Why am I going through this? And I saw manifestation in the sense of when you seek something genuinely, you are given opportunities in front of you, and then it's up to you to kind of take them on.
yeah,
So I was presented with opportunities. I came across people. I was coming across articles and everything. And I started working on myself. So I started kind of working with meditation, And then I went into mindfulness, and then I did a lot of work with coaches. And that is how basically I healed myself. But then when I healed myself without medication, I realized, oh, if I can do this, I can help so many others do the same.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I've seen the dependency on the chemicals, and we actually, in my practice, I believe that we really don't need I mean, obviously, if there is an urgent requirement for something, you need the medication. But in general, if you practice certain things which are could be spiritual in nature, which is totally different from religion. So if you practice things like mindfulness and meditation, and you supplement it by science, I think that's just beautiful. I think that is why I started working. And then, of course, the element of children, that just was the hook for me. I mean, I'm seeing so many kids. I meet so many kids nowadays in my practice where either they're paranoid or anxious or unable to manage the influences of their peers or whatever it is. And there's so many mental health issues coming along with kids. So that just kind of triggered me and said, you know what? If I can get these kids resilient and back in touch with themselves, they will grow up to be struggling less as adults.
yeah, yeah. No, that's really, really interesting, and thank you for sharing that. And for me, one question that comes to mind is that, especially working with children, but across the variety of people that you talked about, do you think these issues that people are experiencing are genuinely becoming more common, or do you think it's now that we have a bit more awareness of that, and therefore, more people are willing to investigate and do that work and try and overcome those in different ways?
Mm, that's a really good question. And I think it's a combination of the two. So I wouldn't say one over the other.
Okay.
The lifestyles we are leading and the disconnect again we're experiencing is contributing to an increase of mental health issues. Also, we are recognizing it more. So it's a combination of two. So um, the same set of people who come to me continue with their same lifestyle, but don't feel the stresses after they've worked.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is it's also how we overstimulated, Matthew. That's a very big problem, even for our generation who's not, at least me. I didn't grow up with gadgets.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I'm just looking at the kids, and if we are so addicted to mobile phones or Netflix or whatever it is, the kids obviously are. And that is having an amazing, amazing effect on our mental health and emotional health currently. And there's more and more science going into it, there's more and more research going into it, and that's just proving that certain amount or certain nature of content that you consume is so not good for you. And yeah, so basically, I think it's a combination of the two. What we're consuming, it's increasing, and obviously, there's more diagnosis now.
yeah. Absolutely. And there's definitely many positives associated with some of those things, but also many pitfalls, negatives as well to be avoided, aren't there? And it's
Yes.
about balance, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, true, true. Yeah, I mean, everything you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, nothing is out and out bad.
Yeah,
So there will be good coming out of it too. But it is that management skill, it is that knowing what to apply when and how much to apply. So you can go and educate kids on apps and programs, but how much can you leave them unattended?
yeah,
When can you leave them unattended? Can they take their phones to bed? Those little things, even for ourselves. So it is one of those things. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. And when when you're working with a new client and helping them to overcome some of those issues, what does that process typically look like?
Well, when they come to me, there is a thing like, let's say, I'll try and explain it with an example. Say, let's say somebody's okay, I'll go with the PMDD example. So this lady came to me and she said, I have PMDD, and when I have those symptoms, um, I am depressed 30% of the time. No, sorry, 70% of the time she said she was depressed, and 30% she was suicidal. It was just acute depression. She'd been on medications, she'd been on antidepressants for the last, the top of my head, 8 or 9 years or so when she came to
Wow.
me at that point.
Yeah.
And I think the GPs had at that point said, do you know what? This is all we can do. We can't do much more. We can't dose you any further. You just have to figure out ways of managing this. So she came to me, and the first point is obviously understanding why they're coming to me. And I always say this to anybody who comes to me: please do not associate yourself with tags. So the first thing I tell them is, right, you have PMDD, you are not, as an you are not PMDD in the sense of that is not you. When you
Yeah, yeah,
define, that should not be a part of you. So similarly, you are not depressed. Depression is something that's happening to you, but you're not depressed, if
yeah,
that's making sense.
yeah, yeah.
What happens is the minute we start associating ourselves, our brain always looks for triggers to prove us right.
Mm,
So our brain is just such an interesting piece of robo working mechanism that whatever you feed it, it'll say, right, I'm going to bring you proof for it.
yeah,
So it doesn't know good or bad. It's just, in that sense, your best friend. It's always supporting whatever comes out. So if you're saying, I am a depressed person, it's going to say, right, okay, I'll make sure you are depressed. So foremost is telling those people, look, let's not do with that. And then after that, it's a lot of subconscious work for me. When it is one-on-one sessions, there's a lot of subconscious. We're trying to figure out what that core emotion really is for that client. Why are they going through this? So it's about, why are you feeling anxious or why are you feeling depressed, and working around those emotions. The beauty of the sessions that I do is that, one, they're not talk therapy. So they don't have to come and discuss their life story with me.
yeah,
And whenever a client leaves, they always leave on a high note. I will never open a wound and let them go feeling wounded.
yeah,
They always go on a very high note. So that is my one-on-one session. So the group sessions is again a practice of a lot of guided meditations and tools. And I'm a life coach. So I kind of introduce those. So I've tried making something unique wherein I blend all the tools, because I just feel like one method does not necessarily fit everybody. So you get a variety of thing tailored to what the client needs.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And you mentioned, some of those tools like meditation, those kind of things, a few times, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on meditation and maybe some of the things that people misunderstand about it and how people, can make use of that, no matter what their circumstances.
Yeah. So I always tell everybody, meditation is what? Meditation is not about silencing your mind. And there's this whole thing on the internet about meditation is silencing the mind, or you need to go to the Himalayas to meditate. None of that.
Yeah,
Absolutely not. You could sit and meditate in a really noisy room. So meditation is actually, the beginning steps are mindfulness. That's where you start off with. You're aware. Mindfulness is nothing but awareness. So
yeah,
you start off with an awareness of yourself, of your thoughts, an acknowledgement. That is extremely important to, we again are so, I wouldn't, the lack of a better word, defensive. So when there is something presented, even our mind, when it presents us something, we always find reasons to say, oh, but we're not like that. We were like that because.
yeah,
Sometimes we don't need the because the reality is, if we shouted at somebody, we shouted. Because they poked me is irrelevant sometimes, because you could have chosen to not shout.
yeah,
So that acceptance, that acknowledgement is extremely essential. And that's mindfulness there. Meditation, what it does is it centers you. It So if you go by the philosophy that we are all energies, there is this energy flowing into you. So any kind of disturbance in that flow of energy, the rhythm, the vibration, the frequency of those energies flowing inside of us creates disturbances. So a very simple example would be, if you look at your breath, the reason we live is because of that breath. There is full stop, nothing else.
yeah,
You're born with that, you die with that. Finished. That's your first thing, that's your last thing. That's meditation, watching your breath. Something as simple as that. So when somebody comes to me, that's the first thing I give them. I teach them how to watch their breath, because there's a technique to watching your breath. But at the same time, you can sit in a really noisy room. And if you're getting really agitated and frustrated, all you need to do is sit down and say, right, I'm going to just focus on these emotions. I'm going to see where they're coming from. That in itself is a format of meditation. And what it does is it centers you, it brings you back to this center point of you, it connects you back. And once you're connected, then change happens.
Mm.
So that is, I think meditation alone is an upgraded form of therapy for me.
Okay, I see. So, yeah, I can definitely see that kind of awareness and that breath work. I've definitely seen those being very, very powerful. And I think for a lot of people, they are very reactive in
Hmm.
nature, perhaps without realizing it. So much information, distraction coming at people all of the time. And I think, yeah, the ability to have awareness around that and take that control over how you choose to react to things is super, super important.
Yeah, and I also think, Matthew, I think we are trained constantly to think about others. This is something I really, really focus in my sessions where I say, do you know what? It is lovely to be very mindful of others' emotions and feelings, but be also mindful of your own emotions and feelings. It
Yeah.
is absolutely essential to be kind to yourself. And that doesn't mean you're not an empath. That doesn't mean you go on being rude to somebody, but it just means you give equal importance to your own well being. And I think the information bit that you mentioned, I think information is out there for everybody right now. I think there's an overload of information for everybody.
Yeah.
So, till the time you don't connect with yourself, you won't know what information you really need.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. No matter what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, there's an almost infinite amount of information about there that you could seek or is coming at you in a Facebook feed or whatever it may be. And for any other people in the coaching consulting space, I think if they're trying to improve the way they work or grow their business or whatever it may be, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can get in people's way in a number of different ways. I think it can harm that ability to make a decision because with all of that information, how can they possibly choose an option? And I think it's just that distraction element as well, isn't there? Even if you have made a decision, it's easy to get distracted by something else that challenges whatever decision you have made.
Yeah, and it kind of interesting you're saying that, because it circles back to that previous question you'd asked me. Is it on the increase or not? And the problem is, if you go back in time when we didn't have mobile phones and we didn't have social media and all of that, mental health was genuinely better. So why have mobile phones and social media become such a big topic? Because we are overstimulated. We something as simple as focus. We've lost that.
Yeah,
The ability to sit and focus on something has gone. We're literally like swiping reel after reel after reel, or whatever it is, podcast after podcast after podcast,
yeah,
or whatever it is. Everybody's like, from big one-hour podcasts, people are going to these little clips of 5 minutes. Why? Everybody's attention span, everybody's ability to focus, we're losing all of that. So obviously, when you start losing all of that, imagine what's happening in the brain. It's just going at speeds it's not programmed to go at. So
yeah, and it's
obviously,
constantly
it's
rewarded, isn't it, as well?
what's that? Sorry.
It's constantly rewarding that pattern as well, isn't it? Of
Yeah,
short burst of something, then a short burst of something else, and so on and so forth.
yeah, and also, I think it takes us away from the ability to fail and introspect, because
Yeah,
you're like, oh, okay, let's say this coach said this didn't work for me. Next, oh, this coach said this, but have you really, really followed it? Have you really tested it? So we are extremely help me there, Matthew. What would you say? Like, when you are kind of backing yourself with proof, even if it's false proof that you're fine, it's the other
yeah, yeah,
person,
yeah. It's looking
you
for that
know?
evidence, isn't it?
Yes, that's it. Yeah. So I think that there are multiple things that are happening over there, and which are contributing in the long run to mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's, you know, clearly a lot of value in the amount of information that is available to people, but I think there's a clear difference between having access to that information and then putting it into practice. And that's where it's not about, that frequency of information or the breadth of information. It's actually that ability to have depth within a narrower area, which I think comes down to that focus point that you were talking to as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that is what how I differentiate information versus knowledge. So information, even in definition, is something facts or data you accumulate. So when you go and you, let's say, listen to 10 people talking about mental health on Instagram, for example, that's information.
Yeah.
Uh, that only comes handy for you when you actually practice it. If you don't practice it, and if you keep gathering all this information, it's of no use. It actually backfires. You keep thinking, oh, I know all of this.
Yeah.
Oh, but nothing helps me. I've had people who come to me and say, I've tried this, I've tried that, nothing helps me. I'm not helpable. And I'm like, right, what have you done? So they've gone
Mm.
on various YouTube things, and they've learned, let's say, coming back to meditation, they've learned it in the wrong fashion.
Yeah.
They don't know where to start from. And somebody like, somebody did, is it Winhoff with that breath thing? I'm
Yeah.
terrible with
Yeah.
names. Yeah. And he did that and he says, oh, I got a brain hemorrhage because of that. And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure because, there are other things happening in your body. You can't breathe to get brain hemorrhage. So I think there is that thing about information being misled because then he started watching things which were actually against breath work.
Mm.
So, yeah, so you need to really be cautious about what information you're taking in and the application of it. There is no point. And now I've actually started telling a lot of my people who come to me to work, and I say, my job is to get you information. Trust me. You can
Yeah.
switch off all the mindfulness stuff you're reading and listening to. Just come to me and do what I'm asking you to do. Be focused.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really powerful. And I think even just hearing you describe that, I can imagine for a lot of people, there could be a lot of fear associated with that or anxiety or wondering, well, but I have enjoyed reading about that, but now I'm trying to put it into practice. You're saying, oh, read less and just trust that. It's almost like there's a lot of time then that previously would have been wasted where they, might have been just scrolling different feeds about those topics and all those other things. It takes some kind of self-confidence, I think, to be willing to let go of that and just be more focused, I suppose, rather than as busy.
Yeah, and also I've seen a lot of people come to me at a point where nothing else is working enough, either not at all or enough.
Yeah.
And they go like, right, okay, so nothing's working. That's why I've come to you. They literally say that very honestly, which is fine with me. Um, but like you said, it is a brave thing. But at the same time, like you said previously, there's a good side to it also because they're consuming all this information. Their awareness is building.
Yeah.
So at one point, breath work was very Indian in the yogic practices. Now everybody is talking about it.
Yes. Yeah.
So obviously, with the information and social media, people are warming up to the idea. They are gaining that knowledge. So there is a plus side also to it. But then I think we need to decide when it's getting a little bit over the edge.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right, and I think it is good for people to have mechanisms to discover that, explore those ideas. But I think what it really highlights is the value of working with and trusting someone with experience to help them actually apply it. Because I think there's only so much you can learn by yourself in isolation, and that could be a long journey, a long path. And for many people, if that's what they want to do or enjoy, then there's nothing wrong with that. But I think if they're actually trying to make a change, getting the support from someone with experience, their personal experience as well as experience of others, is a positive way forward, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And it just, again, an interesting point you've made there because somebody asked me the other day, There is a boom of life coaches and alternative therapy, but there is also a boom of mental health issues. Why? And I was just like, because not everybody who's become a coach or is giving therapy
Yeah,
has been through their own journey of healing. So when you go through your own journey of healing, you know the pitfalls. You know when a client comes, um, and you've given them something and it's not working, you know exactly what that feels like and what needs to be changed. But if you're just following a format of education without your own personal experience put in it,
yeah,
uh, you can actually do land up doing a lot more damage to the person because they can feel like this nothing works for me. So I think that
yeah,
is also something when people choose whom to go to, I think they should also ask people, what is your own journey with this work?
yeah. No, absolutely. And I think to give the counterpoint to that as well, if you're acting as a coach in some capacity, no matter how you define that coach, I think if you find yourself holding back or find yourself seeking to hold a perspective where you deliberately hold back and say, well, no, it's more about the client, it's not about my experience, then I think you have to really question as to how effective and impactful you can be and whether you might have the right intentions, but maybe you just haven't got the right experience yet to help people in the way that you actually want to or should.
Absolutely. And I've had these debates with a lot of people, like, because just because we've not been through trauma doesn't mean we can't help. Absolutely, you can help.
Yeah,
There is nothing saying you can't help, and you will successfully help hundreds and thousands also. But the point I always ask is, if your toddler needs to learn swimming lessons, would you go to somebody who's learning how to swim to teach a toddler? Or would you go to somebody who's already been through that journey, has trained themselves, and is now a swimming instructor? Who
yeah,
would you trust? Somebody who's learned, right? Who's been through that journey themselves, who's a swimmer themselves. So it's a kind of I kind of why I compare that is because it is a life skill. When you go to somebody with your emotions, um, you have to trust them with your life because
yeah,
it's your mental health. So it's kind of similar, I feel, in that sense that you have to really ask the coach or the therapist or whoever you go to, what is your experience?
yeah.
And then decide, you might not need that experience from somebody. You might not, you might just be happy with some very routine stuff, which is fine. So I'm not saying this or that. I'm just saying that's a very good question to ask when people look for somebody to help them.
Absolutely. I think it's about making a well-informed and conscious decision. Again, coming back to that awareness piece, really, it's just try and develop enough self-awareness to work out exactly what you are looking for and how to ask the right questions to work out whether a given individual is the right person to help you in that way.
Yes, absolutely agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And for you, in terms of delivering your own coaching work, I'd love to hear any kind of thoughts you have and in terms of how that's developed over your years of working with people and whether for any other people in the coaching consulting space, what are some of the lessons you've learned that could potentially be useful to them.
I think one thing I've seen a lot of people do, even when I started off a couple of years ago, my colleagues do course after course after course.
Yeah,
And I've advised a lot of people stop. And it's unnerving. Honestly, it is so unnerving. Like any other work field, when you start off, yes, to put yourself out there. But until you put yourself out there, until you actually go dive and swim, we're not going to get anywhere. So you
yeah,
can educate yourself. I'm not saying I keep doing courses myself, but I do them with a sense of awareness. This is where I am in my practice. This is what's going to aid the people who are coming to me if I
yeah,
combine this with that. So I think foremost is anybody who is wanting to be, find your niche, not in terms of people or women or age or whatever. Find your niche as in who do you want to help. So for me, it's anybody willing to bring that change, bring that connect back, live happier. So for an example, like this gentleman who's doing one of the classes with me, He had these constant, as he describes, sensations in his hands. He doesn't remember being without them.
Yeah.
And then we were practicing some specific meditations, and he was like, "Oh, they've gone." And that's the beauty of your brain, your mind, your connection with your
Yeah.
body. So if I found my calling in this kind of work, probably because I healed myself, like I said, with my depression, with my extreme anxiety, I've healed myself through this work. So
Yeah.
for me, I know how it works. Like I had a PCOS, I've healed myself through this work, my PCOS also. So for me, that resonated, but for somebody else, something else might resonate. So, firstly, do not follow what everybody else is following. See what resonates with you. See what you're passionate about. See what you can, in a room, go on talking for hours about.
Yeah.
See what you like studying about. And then just go for it. Train yourself and go for it. Don't do course after course after course. And that's
No,
my
absolutely.
biggest learning as a, call me a coach, mentor, whatever you call me. That's my biggest learning, that until and unless you put yourself out there, it's always an uncharted territory.
No, absolutely. And I think a couple of things I took away from that are really approach it with the intent and the intent to apply it, and then take very deliberate action based on feedback and experience, rather than, you say, just try and consume as much as possible and most likely delay applying it because there's always more to learn, right? But actually, you know, if you're in alignment, then taking that out to the real world, putting that into practice, and then finding out what works for you, and what you want to try and improve, what you want to try and work on, then that gives you something very specific to focus on, doesn't it? Rather than just one of 100 courses that you could take, for instance.
Yeah. And see, that is again, it boils down to your own practice. If, let's say, and everybody has nerves, right? So when I started off, I had nerves, right?
Yeah,
Now, if I cannot work on my nerves, if I cannot take failure or feedback, how can I teach the people to do that? Because I have no clue about it. So,
yeah,
your self practice is extremely important. You have to be able to connect to that side of yourself before you start telling people to do it.
yeah,
So I think that for a lot of people who are there, who are going through, I see a lot of people who are going through so much in their personal life, and they keep posting, often saying, I feel like stopping, I don't feel like doing this. And then people pick them up, and then they decide, right, I'm going to go back to my course and coach. I say, first heal. Because if you don't know how to pick yourself up, how can you teach the other person to do that? Again, it goes back to that swimming example I gave.
yeah,
If you can't save your own life, how are you going to save somebody else's life?
yeah. Absolutely. I think that perspective is really, really interesting. You can't, everyone's going to have those fears and doubts that you talk about, right? But I think having that perspective to know that no one can be perfect coming into that situation, and also, as you say, you can't expect your clients to act in a way that's different to the way that you're acting, and the way that you're thinking, and your beliefs that are informing those actions as well. And I think without that self-awareness, then you're setting yourself up to fail in many ways if you think you can do differently.
Yeah, and there is nothing like perfection, to be honest. It's a myth. Perfection is a myth. We're always work in progress, and it
Yeah,
always comes from failures. I mean, you wouldn't enjoy happiness if there wasn't sadness. So the whole art of accepting sadness, experiencing it, is what I'm talking about. You don't have to be wallowing, you don't have to lock yourself up, and you don't have to beat yourself up for your failures or sad moments. You can just own them with pride. That is what I kind of tell everybody, that don't look at negative emotions like a drainer.
no,
They're there to lift you up.
no. I like the way that you put that, and I think you're right. You need both for the opposite one to exist.
Yeah.
No one can be 100% happy all of the time, because that just means you're at a constant state that can never get better, but can also never get worse, right? I don't think it really means anything to seek a a constant state that would by definition be very neutral in nature, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and there is a winner because there's a loser.
Yeah.
And being a loser is not a bad thing. So
No.
it's one of those things, we have to switch our perception of things. You enjoy daytime and you enjoy the heat and you enjoy the warm weather because there's the cold weather.
Yeah.
So it's always in hindsight, everything exists in balance.
Yeah.
And
No,
that is what we need to
absolutely.
learn to do.
Yes. No. Absolutely. I think that's definitely very very true. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about your perspective on that, as well as how you can kind of help people manage and find that balance for themselves.
Mm. That balance is everything. It's genuinely everything. And I genuinely believe that everything boils down to us. I think it's okay to be selfish because that's how we intended to be. And selfishness is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's a matter of perception. So if we say being selfish is bad, if selfishness is associated with lack of empathy, then yes, it's bad. But you can be selfish and empathetic. You can be selfish and kind. You can be selfish and giving.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I think that's a really really good way of looking at it. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't make time to focus on themselves in that way and develop that awareness and develop that perspective. So I think the work you're doing is super important in terms of helping give people the tools that enable them to do that and then have that perspective throughout, their day-to-day life and their interactions with everybody around them.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a very good starting point for everybody is, like I said, just watch your emotions. That's the most important thing. Or just sit. I make all my clients do this. I tell them to wrap their arms around themselves and say I love you to themselves. And keep saying that, keep saying that, keep saying that. You will see emotions come up. You will
Yeah.
see resistance come up. But it's all good. It's absolutely all good. Because we're so not used to telling ourselves that we love ourselves. So, it's those little things that help you connect back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard someone else talk about the other day in a slightly different way, but it's okay to be ambitious and also be happy with what you've got. And I think quite
Absolutely.
often those two things can be seemingly in tension with each other. Oh, I shouldn't want more. I should be happy with what I've got, or the opposite as as well, right? It's just no, I should never be happy with where I am because I should always be striving for more. But it's okay to have both.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point you make because that actually coincides with the Hindu philosophy of detachment. So, detachment doesn't mean that you have to disown.
Right.
So, detachment actually means it doesn't affect you. So, you don't go like that with your emotions.
I see.
So you can have ambitions, like this person said. You can want to grow. I want to grow. You want to grow. We can all
Yeah.
be fully entitled to dream of that and fulfill that dream. But the beauty of detachment here is that we're not holding every single aspect of that growth. We're not in control obsessively about
Yeah.
how that growth looks, what it looks like, what do we need to do, what do we not. There is a certain level of flow, there's a certain level of trust, and that trust is within ourselves and within this universe. Opportunities will come, things will happen. We've just got to trust, and we've got to still keep dreaming. So I think, yeah, it's the same thing, but just in a different format, that I'm saying that, yeah, don't hold too tight. I think, again, control comes from a sense of lack. There are emotions behind that sense of control. So if somebody struggles with that, again, I say, ask yourself, where is that control coming from? Because it's
Mm.
one of the most, I've been through control issues, and oh my God, I think I made everybody unhappy. My husband, my kids. It was just, I was like a nightmare mom for my kids. But yeah, when I learned to let go, I saw my kids actually thrive. But
Yeah.
that needed a lot of trust in myself, in them, in the universe, in everything. And
Yeah.
that's the
Absolutely.
whole idea.
I think it is acknowledging what is outside of your control as well, isn't it? And just, you cannot ever attempt to control every, outside influence and factor and variable about you, let alone, the people around you and everything else as well. And I think it also comes back to that label and identity piece that you mentioned as well. And I think, what you're talking about with that detachment concept for me, sounds like you know, it's okay to pursue X, Y, and Z. It's okay to want this, but don't make that your identity. Just make that part of what you're trying to achieve in the world.
Yes. So also um, it's a nice way of saying or feeling or living through fallbacks and setbacks and failures and those oh, this didn't go my way, this is not how I planned it kind of moments,
Yeah,
because you're trusting the universe, you're trusting yourself, you're like, right, it's okay, it's fine, I've got this. So there's a lot of, again, confidence that comes out of that trust.
yeah,
And again, ambitions, while we're on that topic, dreams, I think, again, people should base on what they really want to do, not in terms of, I want to be a CEO, I want to be this. And you can dream of that, but what is it going to make you feel? How is it
yeah,
going to provide for you? How is that you going to provide for everybody else? So I think they work faster when you connect with your emotions for your ambitions.
yeah. I think it's working at what that actually provides for you is so important, because I think once you realize that, you probably realize that that might be the right path, but it might not be, or there might be like 100 other options that are available to you that would achieve the same, or if not better, be in better alignment with what you're actually striving to achieve. And I think people can often just reach for what they think they're supposed to want, or the route they think they're supposed to take to get what they think they want, without really truly reflecting on that in the first place.
Yeah, I've read this. I read this little story. I mean, I'm sure it's not true, but it kind of sums that whole thing up. So there was this man who used to live next to the sea. So he used to see some kids play every evening. So one evening, these kids ran up to him, to this old man, and said, "You know what? We've heard it's going to flood. It's going to flood. Why don't you escape?" And this man said, "Oh no, it's fine. God's going to help me. I've been in God's service all my life. I know God's going to help me." Right.
Yeah,
Okay. So the floods come, and a little boat comes, and they say, "Come on, jump on, jump on." And this old man says, "Oh, no, no, it's all right. God's going to come and help me." So the boat goes. Then something else comes along. I don't remember the story exactly. Something else comes along. He says, "No, no, no, I trust God. He's going to save me." Then a chopper comes along, and they're like, "We're going to put the ladder down, climb up. We're going to save you." He says, "No, no, no. God's going to come." Finally, he drowns. He goes up and he meets God, and God says, "What were you doing?" He says, "What were you doing? I thought you're going to come and help me. I've spent my life trusting you, worshiping you, whatever it is, but you didn't come." He says, "You're such a fool. I was there in the boat. I was there in the chopper. You just made the choice not to trust me when the time came.
yeah,
I was there to help you." So it's kind of, what I'm trying to say is, you need to be open. You can't be so in control with your ideas and concepts that the opportunities, you let them pass by.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes down to knowing those values, and as we said before, having that awareness to know what direction you're trying to take, and then just be willing to, I guess, just be aware of opportunities and be willing to accept changes in the path that you thought you were going to take together.
Yeah. And again, that comes with this connect. When you connect with yourself, everything is heightened. Your intuitions, your ability to read situations and people, your analytical skills, your brain just starts functioning in this beautiful way where it's all about focus. Like I said, the brain's your best friend. So when you direct it to work for you, it works like that. So I think there is this beautiful connection between modern science and spiritual science. Modern science is just proving what spiritual science has been talking about. So again, yeah. So once you go with that connection, really, honestly, sky's the limit.
No, absolutely, Alan. Yeah, I think you're right. And we talked about some of the kind of breathwork practitioners and things before, and I think you're right that the science is now catching up to what they intuitively knew and have been teaching, which is super interesting. And thank you for sharing those points. Definitely like a really interesting conversation. And I think for me, one question I would ask just to kind of wrap things up is for anyone that's liked what they've heard, for anyone that's interested in trying to develop that connection and awareness for themselves. What would you recommend they do next after listening to this episode?
So I'll go back to the breath. So I'll always say, go sit down, find, actually, you know what? This is something I tell everybody. So I'm going to give it here. Nothing new, quite boring, and people find it quite hard. But if you really want to bring that change, switch off those mobile phones 1 hour before you go to bed. Please switch off those gadgets, that television, that mobile phone, nothing. Pick up a book, pick up a journal, do anything creative before you go to bed. Do not consume content. When you wake up, do not consume content. First thing that you do when you wake up is thank the energies, whatever it is. If you believe in God, say God. If you believe in energies, energies. If you believe in nothing, just say thank you for this morning. There are hundreds and thousands of people who don't wake up. You're
Yeah,
one of them who's woken up. You've been given another day, another opportunity. So thank whatever you want to thank, saying thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this new day. Even if you feel like there's nothing to thank in that day, even if you're going through a really rough patch, just for that moment that you've woken up, thank it. Thank whatever it is. And then spend at least 5 to 10 minutes every single morning just doing nothing. Eyes closed, sit down, watch your breath. It is
yeah,
boring. To begin with, let thoughts come. Please let the thoughts come. The mind's job is to bring you thoughts. You cannot silence the mind. It is about giving the mind a different job to do in the long run. But to begin with, all that collection of thoughts and emotions will surface. So let them come. And always imagine that these thoughts are coming on clouds and passing by. So you're just watching your thoughts. And just that much, with the mobile phones in these 5 to 10 minutes, you will start to see a massive shift in your mental health.
amazing. I think that's really great advice, and will encourage people to act on that. But no, thank you for sharing those lessons and the other lessons we talked through, and your journey as well. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think people take a lot from this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.
No worries.